Are you thinking of starting TRT? Maybe you've been spammed with a bunch of TRT adverts on social media now that you've got over 30. Maybe you're already on it. Maybe you're in your early stages and you're just looking for some insight into what other people are doing. I know when I was looking into TRT, hearing other people's experiences was massive because it helped me kind of create a picture beyond just the data that I was seeing online. I was understanding how people are actually finding it, things that aren't necessarily just always the perfect case studies. Well, in this video, I'm going to break it all down. My real unfiltered experience of TRT so far, 16 weeks in. I'm going to break down my expectations versus the reality, going from a lifetime natural athlete to now being essentially enhanced, what my current test levels are now that I'm 16 weeks in, and what my other blood markers are saying. We're going to chat about my dosing, where it started, where it kind of went to, where it's at now, based on my doctor's maybe approval or not, and also how often I'm injecting. We're going to cover the extra supplements I'm taking, changes to my training, nutrition, the body composition, some of the side effects that I may or may not have expected so far, some of my biggest learnings and takeaways, should you start, and a quick Q&A of a couple of common questions that I've been getting online that I thought would be really good to kind of put into this video and share with you. Firstly, let's just address the common misconceptions. Some of them are that TRT is a magic fix, that it's like the elixir of youth. You inject and then you feel amazing, you feel like an absolute boss. That wasn't quite my reality. In reality, I got stronger. I started TRT about 10 weeks out from my last powerlifting competition. And I do think that TRT maybe gave me a little bit of an extra edge. The fact that I could only train 2 times a week. Well, I say only could train. That's where my motivation levels were. I just couldn't be bothered to get into the gym and train. And now that was a huge sign originally for me that something was up. So over those 10 weeks, or training about 2, maybe 3 times a week, I did end up competing and squatting 255 kilos, which was a 5 kilo lifetime PB. I did get 270 on my back and unfortunately I failed it. But with that fail, I definitely could have got it if I didn't misgroove it. But always the way, you didn't get it, so it doesn't count. But I do feel confident enough that next time I will hit that and I'll hit more. I bench pressed 162.5 kilos, which was a 2.5 kilo lifetime BB. And then I hit a 282 kilo deadlift, where I then actually kind of tweaked my back. The warm-ups for the deadlifts were a bit shit. Everything didn't go too well. Got on the platform and I kind of fell apart. I wanted a 301 kilo deadlift, but that wasn't quite going to happen. That wasn't on the cards for the day. So it is what it is. Now, in regards to body composition, so I started TRT back on the 7th of November and I went from 78 kilos to 83.9 kilos of muscle. That's nearly 6 kilos of muscle from the 7th of November to the 26th of January. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that is all muscle, and in that duration, my body weight went from 102.1 up to 112.1. So I essentially put on 10 kilos of body weight. My muscle, as I said, went from 78 to 83.9 kilos. So that was at 6 kilos. My fat-free mass went from 82.1 to 88.3 kilos also. Now, the big thing I take into consideration there is at the end of the day, I put on 10 kilos of weight. And as part of that 10 kilos, that 6 kilos of muscle will be a lot just full of muscle compared to what I already had. My scales that I'm using are just the ones that I've always used, ones that you stand on, it takes your body fat reading from there, which is not accurate, but I've used that set of scales for years. So I've got a relatively good idea that I did put on some muscle. Now, since the 26th of January, I've kind of been dieting back down because I competed at the 100 to 110 kilo category and I didn't want to stay there. I definitely wanted to be closer to the 100 or 95 to 100 kilos. So I've been dieting pretty much ever since. I'm currently at 105.4, so I've lost a good 7 kilos basically, and my muscle is down to 80 kilos. So I went from 78 to 83.9, now back down to 80, and my fat-free mass went from 82.1 to 83.3 down to 84.2. So realistically, over the last 16 weeks, I've put on about 2 kilos of muscle, and according to the scales, about 0.5% in body fat. However, this wasn't even the main reason I got on TRT in the first place. It was due to the lack of motivation, the lack of drive, poor mood continuously. So until 2 weeks ago, that hadn't changed at all, but I'm going to dive into that a little bit more when we discuss the dosing. So when I started TRT, my starting dose was 100 milligrams per milliliter, which was split into 2 doses. So 2 50 milligram doses. So on the needle, you'll see 0.25. So I would have taken 0.25 on the Monday and 0.25 on the Thursday. Then after 6 weeks, I did a finger prick test. The testosterone levels come back at 500, which was awesome. I was like, sweet. So my dose got increased slightly. I went up to 120 milligrams. So that was split into two 60 milligram doses. So 0.3 on the needle 2 times a week. So I kept it on Mondays and Thursdays. And after another 6 weeks of dosing in at 0.6, my numbers went up slightly. Actually, they went down in the free test. So my free test went from 0.5 down to 0.4. So, but there was there was a 0.231 increase since my original blood test before I started TRT. So I was now technically in that normal range. So my estradiol went up to 122, which was a 16-point increase, but I was still in that normal range. My SHBG went down to 27.1, so that was minus 1.1, which kept me still in that normal range. And my total test went up 10 points and it got me to 18.5, which was just the very start of the normal testosterone range. So after those results come back, obviously that come from a full venous blood test and the one from my arm, my dose got upped to 160 milligrams. So on the needle, it's up to 0.8. So I was supposed to be dosing that at two doses of 0.4. However, there's been a slight change. I said to the doctor that I wanted to increase the frequency, so it was going to be 0.2 every other day. So I wanted to try to match more my natural productions of other sex hormones and keep my estrogen kind of in balance. So by then making the dosing more frequent, that was then going to hopefully help manage that estrogen level. Now that 0.2, I might have slightly tweaked and gone up to 0.25. So what that's then done, that's taken me up to 200 total milligrams every week. So that will now take me up to a full 1 milliliter in the needle, dosed through 4 doses throughout the week. Now, since doing that increase, I definitely have noticed a massive difference in my mood, my motivation, my drive, pretty much all the areas that I expected from taking TRT since I hit that 1 milliliter dose. So whether that's just all through my head or anything like that, I don't really care. I've now got what I wanted out of TRT. So since I'm now on this hormone optimization journey, there's been a lot more focus on certain areas. So I've looked at my blood panel and said, right, so this is probably the first time I've actually taken a deep dive and not just looked at my testosterone levels, my thyroid hormone levels, and my cholesterol levels. I've taken a real proper dive and said, right, where am I under, where am I over? And I've really started to adjust this through many different supplements, which I now take at their appropriate times in the day. My normal go-to is just get the high strength of what you should have, some fish oils, some magnesium, maybe multivitamin if you're lucky. And that was and I was also taking ZAG, which is a lovely liquid gel shot, which kind of gave me quite a lot of different vitamins and minerals to kind of support my health and well-being. But I thought I want this to get a little bit more specificity. So I wrote them down just so I can kind of reel them off. I increased my magnesium. I added in some CoQ10. I also got some liver support, which included some minerals that I needed to bring up. So that liver support is also then going to help with my estrogen production and kind of management. So this specific liver support from Supplement Needs gives me everything that I need. I also take some thyroid support as well, because something on my blood test is that I have low T3. So I have good thyroid stimulating hormones, so TSH. I have enough T4, but I'm not getting enough conversion from T4 to T3. I started taking more ashwagandha, some zinc, and I still take my ZAG. And I also have 2 Brazil nuts every day for that natural selenium, because that's going to help support my thyroid also. And if I could get it from a natural product, that's exactly what I wanted. Because I'm only taking 2 Brazil nuts a day, it's like taking a vitamin anyway. So that was ideal. Now let's discuss the fun stuff. So since I've started TRT, I've also starting to microdose daily Tadalafil, basically Viagra. So the reason for that is because when I was doing a lot of looking online, there was a lot of talk about dosing with like Cialis or like say Tadalafil to help with lower your blood pressure, because it can enhance nitric oxide production, which will then help with recovering energy levels and help oxygen pump around the body. And apparently it helps with reduced prostate enlargement. And because my granddad had prostate cancer, it's definitely something that I want to be aware of and obviously help where I can. So apart from all those benefits, also helps me feel like I'm 16 again. Now in regards to my training, my nutrition and body composition, I qualified for nationals on my last powerlifting competition. So originally what I was going to do was compete, then diet down, do some more bodybuilding focus and get myself ready for a half Ironman that I have in September. Now, because I qualified for nationals and I feel like I have to do it because it's a really cool opportunity to be able to represent myself at an event like this, it meant I had 2 12-week blocks, which I had to give myself proper powerlifting focus again. The first one, I'm including quite a fair bit of extra aerobic work to kind of help set myself up so I'm not coming from a complete zero baseline after my competition. And in the last 12 weeks, when it comes to closer to the powerlifting competition, I'm going to reduce the total aerobic volume, especially the running, because that's quite a lot of stress in the body, maintain, say, my bike volume, keeping it easy, and put all my focus into the powerlifting and the recovery, because that's where the focus and intensity needs to kind of be, rather than in my aerobic work. So if you do want me to break down my training a little bit more, I'll be more than happy to do another video. Comment down below and I'll be sure to get a video done when I can. Now, in regards to nutrition and body comp, as I mentioned earlier, even though my scales, which are generic, they have said that I've put on a fair amount of muscle and I've put on a fair amount of body weight in general. Now, I'm pretty happy with that. That wasn't the goal, but that does mean my expectations of where I can diet down to will probably change slightly, which I'll have to see when it comes to it. So pretty much my game plan with dieting is pretty much just taper myself down, get to under 100, reassess my body and how it looks there, maybe take myself down closer towards that 95 kilo range. And in regards to appetite, which is supposedly something that does get affected when on TRT, I've noticed no difference. I already am a very hungry person anyway. If anything, the recent up in dosing has helped me feel a lot more focused and driven. So actually being in a deficit is a little bit easier than it ever has been. Now, let's talk about side effects. Some common side effects are increased estrogen, increased red blood cell count, lipid profile changes, and a host of other things. Definitely check them out online. But these were the three that kind of stood out to me that I've been making sure I'm giving myself the most amount of focus possible. Now, in regards to the increased estrogen, I'm mitigating that through dosing frequency and having my liver supporting supplement, which, as I mentioned, is the one from Supplement Needs, because it contains something called DIM. I can't even pronounce it, like dindolelimethane or something like that, which can be found in veggies, but I don't actually eat loads of vegetables as it is. And also it contains calcium D-glucarate, which aids liver detoxification of excess estrogen. So because that liver support supplement has that in, it's perfect. It's dosed just right, obviously. So that is my go-to. The increased red blood cell count, that's where you're going to get the thickening of the blood, which may then obviously raise your blood pressure and give you potential things like blood clots and strokes, which obviously I don't want. So this can be mitigated normally by donating blood and also with that daily dosing of Tadalafil. So, because that's again helping oxygen pump around the body, get plenty of blood flow, stop that thickening as much. I did check my levels and they're fine. There was an increase, but it wasn't necessarily something I had to be too worried about right now. But at my next 12 weeks, I will reassess and see if I need to donate blood. I'm still going to try and donate blood at some point. I just haven't got around to it at the moment. Now, the biggest thing for me is the lipid profile changes. Now, apparently some men see a decrease in HDL, so your good cholesterol. Now, my HDL did go down. So I made some of the, it went from I think about 200 to about 150. Now I've made the following changes. I've increased my monosaturated fats, so I'll get a bit more olive oil, avocados and nuts. I've increased my fish oils from where it was to about 2,000 to 4,000 milligrams daily. I've upped my magnesium and I made sure I'm more consistent with my D3 and K2. I'm also a lot more consistent now with Fishy Fridays, where I get some sockeye salmon every Friday, have that with the missus. Obviously line caught, none of that farm malarkey, and just give myself the best possible chance of getting some natural fish oils in as well. So let's now just wrap up with the discussions of kind of my biggest lessons. Has TRT delivered the results I was expecting? And was it just overhyped? And should you take it? Now, probably the biggest lesson that I've taken from this is change takes time. I knew going into it that it was going to take a while, but I didn't expect it to take as long as it did and as many kind of changes in my journey. So the fact that I was having regular blood tests, obviously, well, I've had 2 proper blood tests, but since I've had those 2 proper blood tests, I've been able to see quite a big change. So now looking forward to my 3rd blood test, I've got some consistent things to do in this period to see how much of a change. It makes me feel quite confident, but it's also helped me feel a lot more kind of bought into the fact that it's a journey and it's not an overnight fix, which I obviously knew from the start, but it's really reinforced that because I didn't see the changes straight away, but I was seeing some improvements. Now, the fact that I've found the dose where I feel probably the best, which is at 200 milligrams per week, is really positive. And when I chat to the doctor in 12 weeks time and say, yeah, I kind of went from 160 to 200, but this is a good, and we'll see what we say. We'll see what the blood panel says, and I'll be sure to kind of bring you guys along for the 6th month journey. Ideally, I'm wanting my test levels. I know it's an arbitrary number, but I would like them to be around that 900 mark if possible, as long as my other blood markers aren't in the tank, essentially. I do personally think it's slightly overhyped, especially for the uneducated or the uninformed, because there are so many symptoms that represent, say, low testosterone. it's very easy to think, right, this is that elixir. This is the thing that's going to sort me out. And it's just not. It may help, but it will take time. But to be honest, as I mentioned earlier, I didn't go in with high expectations. I kind of knew it was going to take time, but I didn't expect it to take as long. But because I was already prepared to be in this for the long haul, as long as I saw positive direction of changes, that was where I was thinking, do you know what, this is worth it. And until recently, as I mentioned, literally 2 weeks ago, when I then increased my dose, I haven't felt that. And then I started to increase my dose up to 200 milligrams per week. And that's where I started to feel more like myself and more driven, more focused. And to me, that was kind of the eye-opening moment where I was like, do you know what? I'm at that right point now. Let's now get my head down and focus on all areas to really bring everything up and optimize all areas of my life. The big thing is, if you're over 35, you should definitely get tested. But if you're over 35, you've got to ask yourself these questions, like the common symptoms are brain fog and poor focus, depression or low mood, low energy and fatigue, lack of motivation, higher body fat and poor metabolism. If those sound like you, I would say get tested. Use someone like MediChecks and do like their full blood panel and get yourself a good insight of what's going on. Make sure you get your total test, your free test, your estrogen levels, your LH and FSH, your DHT, SHBG, prolactin and cortisol, and also your thyroid levels. Get them all checked. Big thing about the thyroid is because they have very similar symptoms to low testosterone. And I do kind of have hypothyroidism because of my T4 to T3 production. So it's definitely worth getting that tested. And then if you see that your levels are quite low, do try and make the changes naturally first. One, it's going to be a lot cheaper, but also if you can make these changes naturally first and then down the line say, do you know what, I've done what I can to try to improve naturally and it's not worked, that's essentially what I did, then jump on it. If you talk to a doctor and they say, yeah, they agree, you've done what you can, and go from there. Now, if you do want to bring your testosterone levels up naturally, you want to make sure you sort your sleep. That is one of the biggest things. You want to make sure you've optimized stress, diet, and training. Just make sure you're giving yourself enough stimulus to need testosterone, but also not too much where you're just trashing yourself. When it comes to like your vitamins and stuff, you want to make sure you're optimizing zinc, vitamin D, magnesium, your omega-3s. And then once you've done at least 12 weeks of this optimization, then get yourself tested again and see if your levels are low. And if they're low, then yeah, talk to someone like Manuel, get yourself stuck in and see what the doctor says and go from there. Now, obviously, the only cost that comes from sleep, training, and eating well is effort. And that's what most people lack, is the effort to put into this. So yes, getting yourself, say, TRT is going to help with those, but if they're still shit, you will still feel like shit. It's essentially, TRT is essentially like getting yourself a plaster and putting it over a decapitated arm and it's still bleeding like fuck, and you're like, oh no, I've put a plaster on it. It's not gonna do anything. So you're not addressing the real problem. So by making sure you've kind of optimized all those other areas first, then you can then say, let's make the necessary changes and maybe think about getting on TRT. So in summary, am I glad I've started TRT? I'm going to say yes. My levels have been low since 2018. I've been tested pretty much yearly since 2018, and I've had 2 kids in that time. I've optimized my life as much as I can, and things just weren't where I wanted them to be, and obviously things were declining quite a lot. I didn't want to wait till I'm just arbitrary 40 and then maybe look into it there. I'm 36 now. I thought, let me get started and let me see what changes I can make. Now, the fact that my next blood test is at the 6-month mark, that's a good amount of time being on TRT, kind of ties up nicely because my powerlifting prep kind of finishes at that 6-month mark as well. There's a lot of kind of finishing points at that point. So it'll be really good to kind of maybe bring you guys back along into there, give you a 6-month update, see how things are going, see what my blood tests are saying, see how the powerlifting competition went, and kind of like where I'm going to go from there. So to finish off, I thought I'd do a quick Q&A because I've got a couple of questions which I kind of kept getting online. I kind of summarized them into a few key kind of questions, and I thought I'd give them to you here. So hopefully I address the one that you might be having. If you do have any questions that I don't address, do drop them down below. I'll be sure to get back to you as soon as possible. But first question is, who do I use and how much does it cost? So I'm in the UK, I use Manual, I got tested and I paid £110 a month. I just recently upgraded to their package where it includes blood tests, so I think that went up to about £129 a month. Second question, before I started TRT, was there anything that I wish I knew more about? Now, I'd done loads of reading and researching before I essentially took my blood test anyway, so I'd done a fair amount of research, but where I think I could have improved was, like I mentioned, looking at my blood panel, looking at where things could be optimized a bit better, improving my thyroid health, improving other areas, and kind of bringing those levels up and then seeing how I feel. I definitely probably should have done that first. that probably would have given me a much better baseline to come off of. I still probably would have had low levels of testosterone, but it is what it is. I learned from my mistakes, and that's why I'm trying to deal with those kind of deficiencies now. Also, taking daily Tadalafil, that has been something which I researched afterwards and only found about afterwards, so it probably would have been quite good to get that done from early doors. In the UK, I used Hims, and that was about £156 for 6 months worth, and it's chewable mints. You take 1 a day, ideal. Third question is, how do you manage your estrogen levels? So I'm planning on managing my estrogen levels through changing my dosing schedule and obviously taking that liver support. Fourth question, where do I inject and how often? So as I've mentioned, I'm now up to 4 times a week injecting. When I was 2 times a week, I was injecting my glutes. I was just going from side to side, and then I started to bring in my shoulders. So I went glute, glute, shoulder, shoulder. Now that I'm up to dosing 4 times a week, I'm dosing basically glute, glute, shoulder, shoulder, glute, glute, shoulder, shoulder. So dosing my way around the body, essentially giving each area that little bit of time to recover and hopefully not too much bruising, because that's still something I'm working on, getting as much bruising. Also, I found whenever I inject, 2 things I realized. One, I have no rotation to my right. When I try to inject my right glute, I cramp up in my obliques on this side. So I lack any T-spine rotation really to get to here. And also I seem to get Parkinson's whenever I start injecting. Well, I get into me and I'm like shaking like this. I'm like trying to stay still so it's not bruising me, but it is what it is. Question 5 is, how do I feel now I'm on TRT? As I kind of mentioned in this whole video, I feel good now that I'm 16 weeks in and my dosing is a bit higher than where I started. I feel like I'm at a state where I can see the light at the end of the tunnel, which is amazing. Question 6, does it influence my life or kind of take away from anything? Not really. I make sure I dose first thing in the morning because it just gets it done and out of the way, and it's not then an ag, and then I don't forget about it. I just get it done now every morning, every other day. And lastly, how is my journey going? Obviously this video has kind of spoken all about this, but in summary, it's going well. And it's just to reiterate, it is a journey, and I'm in this for the long haul. Essentially now I'm on this for life or until I decide to stop. So that's going to be no time soon. So it's just about kind of chipping away, monitoring everything. Once I feel like I'm at a good point, then I can go to blood tests, say every 6 months, just kind of see where I'm at and just hopefully get my life back and essentially feel good. And I want to have what I feel right now more consistently, and if not, increase, because you always want a little bit more. So I hope this video helps you, as all the videos that I watched on YouTube before really helped me with my journey. If you have any questions on after all of this, do drop in the comments down below. I'll be more than happy to help. But thanks a lot for watching this journey so far, 16 weeks into TRT, and I'll catch you in the next video.